Welcome to Biblical Buffet. This is our next Quick Bites episode, and we'll talk about book of Zechariah chapter 9. We are not going to go through the whole passage as now usual. I just want to point out one interesting thing. Here we have a prophecy. Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you, righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on the colt, the foal of a donkey. And usually, when people talk about this, they might come to some possible wrong conclusion. Most of the sermons that I've heard, either on this text or on the text from the Gospels where we have fulfillment of this prophecy, where Jesus, during Palm Sunday, comes into Jerusalem, enters Jerusalem on a donkey. Usually when people see Jesus on a donkey and the joyful crowd, they have palm branches, they put their outer garments on the road and he rides on them. So it's kind of like he rides over the tops of the trees, he rides on the shoulders of people, he enters into this glorious city. And the idea is that while he rides a donkey, the idea is that he is so humble and so meek, which is true, he is humble and meek, that he takes do not want to make any kind of brand advertisement here, but instead of driving, Maserati, he basically enters into Jerusalem on, let's say, Toyota Corolla. Something regular, something relatively simple. And that's the mistake. This is wrong. Jesus is still meek and humble, but as a king, he could have, and maybe in the eyes of many people who wanted to get rid of Roman occupation, he should have entered on the horse. The thing is, back there, horses were not used for simple enjoyment, by no means for plowing. It was an army part, a military unit. Okay, so every horseman, every rider, or especially with a chariot, we can compare it to, Humvee, or a tank, good old Sherman tank, this kind of stuff. That's why in Deuteronomy 17, when we have rules for a king, how king of Israel should rule, one of the rules is, as I said, in Deuteronomy 17, verses 14 to 17, we read, when you come to the land that your God, Lord your God is giving to you, and you possess it and dwell in it, and then say, I will set king over me like the nations around me, you may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. And one from among your brothers, and shall set king over you, and you may not put a foreign over you who is not your brother. Now, three main rules. The first one is actually, he must not acquire many horses for himself, or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said you shall not return that way again, and so on and so forth. Then, many wives, and not so much silver and gold. Okay? So the very first rule is, he should not engage himself into offensive military wars to grab somebody's land. It does not mean that they should not defend themselves, and the troops are great to defend the honor and territory and property of the country. But the idea is that the influence of Israel, first of all, not Israel as a country, but as a witness to the Lord, would be spread through sharing the gospel, sharing the good news about one God who loves them. Okay? So horses are for offensive warfare. You smash the infantry. You, with a chariot especially, you run into infantry and basically, plow them. Unlike that, donkeys still represent a person who is lifted up over the earth or over the surface of the land, okay, over the soil. So he is a ruler, but he is a peaceful ruler. So, for example, we can find one very interesting example that probably most people don't really even notice. In the book of Judges, we have many different stories, and we have great judges and we have poor judges, and sometimes we have great judges who became poor judges. Gideon would be one of those examples. But then at the end of chapter 12, we have a list of judges that barely noticed. For example, chapter 12. For example, we'll start with verse 8. After him, Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters, and he gave in marriage outside of his clan, and so on and so forth. After him, Elon, Zebulunite, judged Israel, and he judged Israel for 10 years. And after Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Peramathonite, judged Israel, and he had 40 sons and 30 grandsons, who rode on 70 donkeys as he judged for 8 years. So he placed his sons and grandsons to help him run Israel for those 8 years. And the thing is, what is cool about this is behind those judges, we do not see any warfare. So it was a peaceful time. They did not need anything like great and grandiose, like a Hummer, 1 or 2 or 3, those big, huge machines to represent their power. Their power was because they were appointed by God and ruled Israel peacefully. So when we go back to the book of Zechariah and when we see those parallel texts in our gospel readings, when we see that Jesus rides on a donkey and enters on a donkey into Jerusalem, the comparison is not between Maserati and a simple car. The comparison is not a tank, not something military, forcefully, something that institutes the kingdom with a military force and support. He is still a king. He can still enforce his law. He can still enforce his rule, and he takes care of, now, believing in ascension, he takes care of the whole universe. But he does it with what we call means of grace. The word and the sacrament. Stay blessed.